In this video, we're going to learn how to begin the process of laying out a complex form. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video I wanted to add to our Fusion Forms Mastery series, and I wanted to get into some more practical applications of the tools. So, of course, we've gone through and we've modeled some cars in Fusion 360 Forms, we've looked at fender flares off of mesh scan data, and we've taken a look at creating just some basic shapes. But the next step in the challenge is to find an object and try to replicate it. Now, it's important to note that I'm not going to be going through the entire modeling process for this helmet, but I do simply want to go through some of the steps that I would use to set up a new design like this. So first, I have two images I pulled directly from the EVS manufacturer site. So I have a top and I have a side, and these are the only reference images that they had that would be of any use to us. Would be great if there was a perfect front view, and I actually have a version of this helmet, but it's not worth us taking a bunch of pictures to get them into the software. So once we have our references laid out, we need to decide what shape we're going to start with. For me, I generally start with either a face or a plane. Now, I like to start with these surfaces rather than primitives, and that's generally my workflow. So we're going to start, we're going to create this, and then we need to be mindful of the number of divisions that we're using. So I'll temporarily hide the canvases. Generally, using one is going to be a good solution, but sometimes we want to divide it up in the middle, and we want to have symmetry. So we're going to use mirror symmetry along the length and say OK. From here, I'm going to bring back the canvases, and now I want to move this body into place. Because we have symmetry, I can do this by selecting one face, and I'm going to start by pulling it over to the front. I'm going to box select this back edge, and I'm going to pull this up. I do also want to make sure that I'm in box display mode, which is Alt and 1 on the keyboard. You can also go into your selection options and make sure it's on there. Now that we're in box display mode, I'm going to carry on creating some geometry by using Alt and Extrude. Now, obviously, under the visor, I don't really have a good idea of the shape of the helmet, so I'm just going to make a couple of extrudes, letting go of Alt and then carrying this back. Noting that this air exit vent is really going to be added onto the shape, so we're going to carry on assuming it's round and smooth, and that's a detail that would get added later. Same thing here. This is really an extra feature that's added to help keep the goggles in place. So that would be added later on with some additional detail. All we're really looking to do is get the rough shape down. Once we have this rough shape down, we could make some adjustments to the center line to add some curvature. Could go back and forth between smooth and box display. But at this point in time, it's not really that important. If we want to do it, I would suggest selecting this entire thing. I would reset my pivot point somewhere in the middle, and then I would scale this down in plane just slightly. Noting that it's not really going to give us the best results, then I would scale it vertically, and then maybe reset my pivot point over here, and I would maybe scale this horizontally to bring some of that in. You can see that it takes a bit of time. Sometimes just moving it down or moving it around at the starting point of this is more helpful. So then I would take this vertex and simply bring it down. And then maybe take this entire edge and bring it up a little bit. Then take this vertex and bring it up. A lot of this is going to get redone and retopologized. So it's not really worth a lot of time at this stage, but we do want to get it sort of roughed in. Now, some of the main things that I think about when I'm starting a project like this is going to be where we need the divisions. We don't want to add too many, but we need enough to capture the curvature. From here, I'm going to take this edge and begin extruding it out. And as we do this, I need to switch to a top view because I need to pull this out. While I don't necessarily have visibility on the shape from this direction, we know that it's going to be rounded and it's going to carry on back around the helmet. So if we come down to the side, we can sort of work in plane. We can move from the top to the side view and just sort of manipulate these as we see fit. And it's also good to go into a front view to make sure that we are getting at least somewhat of a good topology. From here, it gets a little bit tricky because we need to rotate and we need to decide if we're going to carry this back to the back of the helmet or if we're going to carry it down and around. The decision that we make in order to decide which direction the topology goes is really going to come down to how we want to control or define these loops. So in this case, because this is a critical feature, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn this quad and I'm going to wrap it around. So in order to do that, I'm going to start by moving my pivot point and I'm going to begin rotating this slightly. And I'm going to have to do the same thing to this edge. I want to move the pivot point and I want to begin rotating these slightly so that the curvature, or at least the change in curvature, doesn't happen all at once. So then I can use Alt and I can begin extruding this down. Once again, resetting my pivot point and rotating this around. Probably going to scale it down a little bit horizontally as well. And then Alt again. And once again, we want to rotate that pivot point. Potentially, it just kind of depends on the geometry that you're working with, right? So if you want to pivot it about that point, then that's exactly where you want to place it. And we want to just start moving that around. And then as we use Alt, notice that the pivot point is staying in place. So we can just rotate this and we can scale it. And again, just sort of working our way around. I'm going to go up to here. I'm going to rotate it around. I'm going to scale it. Then we'll do one more here. Now, keep in mind that as I did this, I didn't actually work at all with the curvature. I didn't move anything. So now I need to come back and I need to bring these close together. I need to select each of these edges and I need to begin to sort of put them in the right location. Now, if we do this from the side, it really helps us to lay out the patches or lay out the faces. But then we need to come back to other views and we need to really decide where each of these things is going to be. This is where the top view comes in handy. You'll notice that this is a little twisted, so we need to make some adjustments here. Probably pull some of these edges in, such as these two. And again, the goal at this point is not to get it perfect, it's just to start to build out the shape. So before I add any more, I want to merge those front two together, and I'm going to do that with weld vertices. When we put them together, it's going to automatically put them on the symmetry plane, so that's okay. Then I'm going to switch to smooth display, and you can see we're starting to build out the shape. From here, as we go to a right-hand view, I now need to build out this bottom section. So again, modify edit form. I'm going to use Alt. I'm going to bring this forward pretty far. And then I'm going to go to a bottom or a top view. And I want to pull this out. It's going to be, wherever the shape of the helmet's going to be. We can look at this from the front and the side, see if it makes sense relative to where we built this opening. Then I'm going to pull it forward a bit more. I might want to rotate this. So I'm going to reset the pivot point. I'm going to rotate this and scale it a little bit. And then we're going to extrude it again. And then I'm going to rotate around to the front. And again, I'm going to start to pull this in. We need to figure out the next edge. So I'm going to rotate this around. And I'm going to pull this one in as well. Then I want to go and I want to weld those vertices. We could use merge edge here. It actually would be just fine, but I like weld vertices a little bit better, so that's the one I go to. So again, now we're sort of building out the shape or controlling it where we need the curvature, and then we can go back and begin to divide it up more. So we know the number of divisions that we have on the top, and we've only got a few on the bottom. So now we can get a little bit closer. We can begin to manipulate these where they need to go, pull them forward to control some curvature. Then we can go into insert point and we can begin dividing this up where we need to. It's important to note, because we didn't have any divisions, when we start dividing it up, we need to go in and we need to start working on the shape and pulling it out. This is going to take a lot of back and forth, and that's part of the process. But it's always a good idea to start with the least number of edges or divisions that you can use. And if you have any selections, make sure that you just escape out of the command. We begin breaking this up. And again, I'm going to go to edit form. I'm going to bring this out. And what I'm looking to do again is just sort of build out that curvature. If we go to smooth display, you can see what we're doing is we're building out the bottom section, building out the middle, and building out the opening for the goggles. And once we have those rough shapes in place, then we can start to bridge some things together. So for example, this section here, the way that the curvature is going to flow is we're going to come back, being mindful of the divisions on the top of the helmet. We're going to come back again. This time it's going to go up a little bit. I'm going to begin to rotate this. So I want to set the pivot at the top here. And then I want to begin to rotate this edge a little bit because it's going to meet this edge back here. And then I'm going to extrude it one more time. And again, we didn't really worry about the location of it, but when we're using things like weld vertices, remember whichever one we select is going to go to the last selection. So this helps us move that one in place, and then we can just worry about moving just a couple of the other edges. So begin pulling these in, maybe look at it from a top view, and you can see we're starting to build out the curvature. We can see that the bottom seems to be maybe a little bit incorrect, but the way that these helmets work and the way that most motocross and street helmets work is that the middle section is the widest and then they sort of taper down a little bit, not drastically, but the bottom section is a little bit narrower than this. So we need to increase or we need to widen this. So what I'm going to do is actually select a face, which I don't normally do. Then I'm going to pull this out to the side. Then I'm going to pull this edge out to the side, and then I want to look at it again. So again, smooth display, you can see what we're doing is we're starting to build out the shape where we need it, and then we're going to start connecting the pieces. We could do this a couple different ways. We can use tools like fill, and then we can go back and begin adding edges where we need them, or we could carry on connecting what we know needs to be connected. But it's always a good idea for us to work in box display and try to make the locations of these divisions mindful of how the rest of the model is being divided. So as I look at this, the bottom isn't really divided up in an ideal way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this up here. I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And then I'm going to get rid of some of these other edges. Just select and delete them. And now what I can do is I can bridge these two edges together. So I'm going to go to bridge. My first edge selection will be here. My second one will be here. And the number of faces between is going to be 1 because that's the number that we have over here. And then I can use modify and fill hole and fill the back. So you can see what we're doing is we're starting to fill this in, smooth display. You can see it tapers down. It still needs work on the shape, but the main factor here is that we're defining the curvature, we're defining the shape of all of the different face divisions based on where we need the control. Now, once we have the basics in place, that's when we start to go back and manipulate the shape. So for instance, the edge flow from the back is not very good. So what I would do is I would begin to manipulate this. I'd potentially pull this out, maybe pull this vertex in a little bit. Then I would look at this control here. I don't really need this very consistent patch. This could be fairly wide at the back. And I'm going to pull these out. Again, working in plane. It's going to be important that we look at it from the back, the front, the side, the top, but not really trying to do it in 3D freehand. So it's looking all right, looking okay. I like the divisions here. This edge could probably go out a little bit. So I'm going to move that out just a little bit. So that way it tapers in at the bottom. And I can do the same thing to these edges as well. I know that those are going to be important. Maybe pull this edge out a little bit in plane. And then this edge right here, I'll probably just do this with a vertex. I'll pull that forward a little bit. And then again from the side, just make some adjustments. And what we're looking here for is, again, a consistent transition in the shape. Now what I want to do is I want to connect this front, and because we're working across the symmetry line, we need to select both sides. It's going to be important if we want them to stay connected. And I'm just going to begin pulling this down, and then I'm going to scale it vertically. Now, scaling it vertically is going to allow us to sort of compress those edges so that they're pretty flat. And then I need to sort of think about where my divisions are for the faces that I'm going to connect to. So in this case, I want to insert a point, give me something to connect to. So then I can go to my weld vertices. Again, the last selection is going to be the to, or where it's going to go to. And you can see here that looks pretty good. So now go back and forth between box display and smooth display. Simply take a look at the shapes that we've created and make some adjustments as needed. So this face right here is not in the right location. So we're going to make some adjustments. Do this from the front. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to pull this edge out as well. Open it up a little bit. And this is part of the problem when we don't have complete references. It makes it a little bit more difficult. If you have a physical product, it really helps. But for us, we're kind of just doing this based off of just essentially what we know that the shape is going to be. So now that we have that, again, we want to look at where the divisions are. If this is the correct place for that, then we want to make sure that we divide these faces up. Again, I'm going to go to insert point. I'm going to divide it here, repeat that process, divide it here, and then I'm going to select this edge and delete it and delete that one. So again, now I can go back and extrude, or I can bridge between these two, one face division between, and now I can use modify fill this simple edge here. I'm going to do the same thing over here, noting that we have an end gone, so I'm going to use the fill star, which will let me come back and decide how I want to break this up. Now, ideally, this is one of those star points where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different edges coming in, but you'll notice it's the transition, it's the turning point for our shape. So when we go back to a smooth display, this is likely going to be one of the areas where we potentially have problems, because now we've got a 5-sided end-gon right here. And this is going to be less than ideal in terms of curvature, but you can see that this actually works out pretty well for this shape. This looks kind of like a 1970s Bell motocross helmet, but we haven't added any detail in yet. The last thing we need to do is figure out this top section. We could take a shortcut and we could fill this, and then using the fill star method, we'd have to come back and sort of connect the edges. But that's a lot to fill in. So I think that the best option is to really take a look at where the divisions are and where we can fill in. So we want to be careful that we don't end up with triangles if we don't need them. So for example, if we took this edge to this and bridged it, it would leave us with a triangle here. So we need to be mindful of these decisions. If we take this edge and extrude it forward, then it'll allow us to have a quad. So I'm going to go to modify. I'm going to extrude this forward. And then what I want to do is use modify, weld vertices. I'm going to stick this one to here because I know where that location is. It's okay. And then I can take this one and stick it up here, and that keeps a quad there. Now likely I'll have to divide it up some more later, but that at least keeps that 4-sided for me. If I go to smooth display, you can see it's a little too tight right here, but these are all things that we are going to have to work on. We need to be careful not to have too many divisions too early. As we're doing this, you can see that we've got 2 here, and that means that this is going to end up getting divided anyways, which will help us downstream, but we need to do it mindfully to make sure we maintain those 4 sides. So what I want to do is I want to go to modify, and I'm going to extrude this out. I'm going to rotate it, and the rotation at this point honestly doesn't matter too much, but I do want to make sure that that middle edge is in roughly the right location. And the reason I say the rotation doesn't matter is because when we weld these together, this point is going to go to my selected location, and this point's going to go here. So the only one that really mattered is that one in the middle. And then we just need to go back and adjust it. So again, from the front, we'll just take a look at the shape, make sure that we adjust it so that it is reasonable. Probably pull this one in a little bit. And now you can see what we have left is we've got 2 here, and this one single face. So we want to fix that by going to insert point. I'm just going to pick the middle, I'm going to go to the middle here and the middle there. Now I've divided it up. I've kept all my quads. This one here needs 2 divisions, or I need to get rid of this edge. So again, modify insert point, and I'll just go down selecting all the midpoints all the way to the bottom. And now I should be able to fill this, but this division right here is kind of high relative to this one. So what I want to do is insert another point. I'm going to come and just simply topologize or change where it's going, and then delete that edge and just let it sort of fix itself. So I'm going to try to use bridge in this case. It's something I don't generally do, but I'm going to try to use bridge and have 2 faces. And what ends up happening with this is these edges are not connected, so we still need to go in and weld vertices together. I'm going to box select those 2, and then I'm going to take this one up to here. So at that point, we've filled everything in, but obviously we need to make some adjustments to the shape. So then we're going to come back and just sort of start pulling it and sort of getting it into order, into place. So we want to bring these vertices up. I'm going to bring these vertices up as well. Bring this one up. I'm going to rotate it around, kind of see where we're having trouble. This edge right here, the entire edge probably needs to go out. We're going to pull that out a little bit. And then we need to look at what's happening in the back. So again, just need to play around with these shapes. We need to pull them to where, the location that makes sense for our topology. So view this from the side, maybe pull that forward, pull this forward. This quad right here is not ideal. We want to bring this down, take that vertex out, and probably pull it back. So now if we take a look at this in smooth display, you can see that we're starting to get a pretty good result. We need to do a little bit more work for the overall shape to sort of flatten it out. But this is the base shape of the helmet, and then we can go in and we can start adding the details. I could spend probably another 20 minutes just sort of finessing the shape, but I think the general idea still holds true. When we're starting with a complex design, the basis is to build out the forms or the cage wherever it's going to be important that we control that shape. Once we do that, in this case, we sort of worked our way around the opening for the goggles, we worked our way around the bottom of the helmet, and we worked our way around the top of the helmet. So those were the main control areas, and then we built around from there. We sort of worked our way back and we worked our way over the top. So understanding those basics and the way in which we control those edge loops is going to be really important. So at this point, if you have any questions, please let me know. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.